what's the aim? What is your aim? And then the response is usually, well, freedom from suffering. But what do you mean by suffering that you're trying to be free from? Or what would freedom mean?
Right. Oh, yeah. So, what is suffering, basically?
Yeah. What do you understand by what are you trying to escape?
Yeah. Because the reason a mind suffers is because the mind doesn't understand suffering.
Yes.
Not because mind experiences suffering. But of course, everybody starts by non-understanding. So, firstly, you experience suffering, you want to get rid of it, you want to deal with it, you want to seek, you want to practice, you want to just do something about it. But then, yes, if you have come across the right instruction, then you should be realizing gradually that, right, that which I'm trying to get rid of, that suffering, that pain, actually needs to be understood in order to get rid of it. So then, do I understand suffering? What is suffering for me? So when I experience discomfort, where is that suffering? Is it just state of mind, state of the feeling, both, neither, in between? Have I understood what suffering is? Because I feel justified in being preoccupied and constantly seeking the answer and practice to get rid of it. But as I said, if you actually start reading the suttas closely, you realize getting rid means understanding. That's how you abandon it, not having it. So what is there that needs to be understood? So what is suffering? Yeah, let's start with that.
Mental anguish, pressure. But in terms of anguish and stress is a mental stress.
So can you have a pleasant feeling experienced through your senses and so on, but mentally suffer on account of it? Can you have an unpleasant feeling but mentally not suffer on account of it? Yes, to all options. Exactly. Yeah. So then suffering is not in how you feel, which is why we come back to what I keep saying on and on and on and on. You have to stop taking for granted and feeling justified in trying to get rid of your feelings because they bother you. Because you're acting out of the bother of the feeling means you're affirming your assumption, your wrong view that the problem is in the feeling. So where is then that suffering? If it's not in the feeling, if you can sometimes feel good or bad, but not necessarily suffer. See, if the suffering is in the feeling, each time you're experiencing discomfort or feeling not so good, you would also have to suffer on account of it. But the fact that you don't means it does not actually match, doesn't add up that suffering is there, because otherwise why are you not suffering?
Aren't there two types of unpleasant feelings? So some are connected with, let's say, bodily state, I don't know, whatever, and others are connected with, say, well, I'd call them your karma, basically. It's the result of your unwholesome actions that cause sort of distress, maybe remorse, and all this, let's say, all the hindrances. So,
well, yeah, but that's irrelevant. But you can have 2 types, 6 types. Neither of them is the cause of suffering. Because if your karma would be the cause of suffering, means you wouldn't be able to do anything about it until the karma runs out. And as the Buddha said himself, that's a completely wrong view. It's a form of determinism. So yes, some might be caused by karma, some might be caused by what you did, what you thought, some might be caused by immediate physical experience, some might be caused by change of elements. Those are just why they're there. But that doesn't matter, because none of them is the root of suffering. Presently arisen cause, presently arisen suffering. And that's exactly the point. See, people would be concerned about where their feelings came from and why, because they still assume that the suffering is in them or defined by them. So it's in the broadest terms, as we said so many times before, it's your presently enduring attitude to the presently enduring feeling, in regard to the presently enduring feeling. That's where the suffering is. So,
is it possible to be, enlightened and still suffer on account of your hindrances, let's say?
No. It's possible to be enlightened and still have discomfort and uncomfortable feelings coming.
That's true.
But you wouldn't suffer on account of them.
But isn't it like this, that the nature of these feelings, so the origin of these feelings is changed? So they might be coming from body, but they're not going to come from the hindrances. So and this.
No. Well, it doesn't matter. That's the point. Like in that sutta where the Buddha lists those 7 or 8 things, why, because of which one might feel suffering. It was just to tell you basically that one of the reasons was circumstances and accident.
Why one might feel?
Well, one might experience discomfort.
Feeling.
Yeah, sorry, not suffering. Well, why one might feel discomfort and experience uncomfortable feelings. Change of the elements, change of the bile and so on. Previous karma was just one of the reasons. In other words, the whole point was like, yes, they will have a reason to be there. The reasons might change, but if feeling was not a problem to start with, why it is there and what reasons are behind it are equally not a problem. And feeling is not a problem. The root of suffering is not feeling. It's not one suffers because one feels. No, one suffers because one craves. And one craves in regard to what one feels, regardless of why one feels that or this, and where it came from. So present enduring attitude, i.e. craving, towards present enduring feeling, regardless of why it came, and why, and for how long, and what caused it, and whether it will be caused again. So how do you start? By upgrading or removing the wrong attitude, or fading away, or abandoning, relinquishing, overcoming the wrong attitude towards whatever you're currently feeling. What would be the necessary first step?
Sense restraint and virtue.
Exactly. Why?
Because it's it's emulating non-craving to instead of.
In other words, because non-sense restraint and non-virtue would always be rooted in craving.
Yeah.
And it
like whether you know it or not. Yeah, it
feeling.
requires craving. Well, and that exactly, craving would then perpetuate the assumptions where the problem is. Acting out of craving feeds the assumptions as to what you should act towards and where the problem is. So, virtue, sense restraint, and as we discussed in previous talks, that kind of starts revealing the intentions, the choices on that mental level, makes it more obvious, which is what starts constituting the development of the mind. So if you're not acting by body, by speech, you're now discerning the intentions, the leaning, the attitudes of the mind in regard to this that's felt or that is felt. You can start discerning the difference, or at least distinguishing it. Now, you can't willingly choose to not have a certain attitude towards a feeling. So, if there is a prospect of agreeable feeling, sensuality, safety of some sorts, your mind is delighting in it. So what do? Do you get rid of the delight by denying the thoughts? What do? How do you not delight when the Buddha says he doesn't delight in that feeling? He doesn't welcome it. How do you do that? How can you do that? Can you just choose to not delight in what the mind is already delighting in?
So
how did the Buddha do that while he was still a bodhisattva, as he said in that sutta?
Contemplate the danger.
Exactly. Contemplating the context, the wisdom that you got on account of pondering and reflecting. So my mind is delighting in the prospect of this. I can't stop that. Well, what I can stop is acting out automatically, habitually, and what certainly I can provide for this untamed mind, this beast that wants to go and feed in other people's pastures, well, I can keep just talking to it in a sense of providing the context, the danger, reminders, and it will have to listen. It cannot ignore it. It might not listen instantaneously, but as the Buddha said, he would think about the peril, the lack of satisfaction, how this is not beneficial for me or for others, and dwelling on that context while the mind delights the sensuality, would stop delighting in it. So you got rid of it. And then ill will comes, thoughts of cruelty come, same. You work on the sustaining the context, composing the context, the samadhi of the context of, no, this is harmful, factually harmful. You don't need to be, is this harmful? Let me look at the etymology of the word harmful. You know it's harmful. Results in further engagement, further hassle, further proliferation, further repercussions for you, for others, for both. And every time that you can remember in the past, it always resulted in the same. And that's why even you want to practice now, because on some level you already know it is not beneficial for me. So hammer that in and keep hammering that in day and night, not blindly like some sort of mantra, but when the mind delights towards sensuality, when the mind has the attitude towards cruelty or thoughts of ill will and so on, you provide a context so the mind comes down. You can't just tell the mind to come down. Well, eventually you can. When you tamed it, then becomes pliable and listens to you. And then you could directly go over there or investigate this, don't think about that, and it will listen every single time. Because you did the work of taming it down first. But even then, it's not a matter of the choice that you think choice is now. The way it is. It's a different relationship, but yes, you have developed it.
Whereas if you're used to acting out of it, going towards the content, then asking these questions just is harder and harder, and is less and less. They become more and more abstract, and they drift away. So that's why, like, first you have to stop engaging with it physically, verbally. Bite your tongue if you have to, and not speak and not act. Again, not just out of some mystical release, so that you can basically start discerning. The context, the mind, the intentions, let me ponder on these thoughts, these dangers, within what mind is delighting, or within what mind is resisting.
It's like this, in mundane sense, the intervention, this person is addicted to something, and then the family gets around and intervenes, and tells him, look what you're doing, look what is happening.
Yeah.
And then maybe for a while, he gets the picture, gets the context, goes to rehab or whatever, but with yourself that's what you're going to do with your mind. Always intervene.
And the reason why it's a good example also is because it is kind of indirect. See, even in mundane sense, the intervention is successful one when a person decides on account of what you've been telling him. It's not a really successful one when you just force them to. They might do it for as long as there is a force applied. The moment that stops, they drift back because the views haven't changed.
Just understanding is when you've seen the harm.
You can't, you can try and force your mind, but you can see what it will lead to. The point is, no, you prevent it from making it worse further. You prevent it from kind of aggravating the situation through like non-restraint and non-virtue. Then your work is to just feed it this context and sustain the context and protect the context and make sure you don't forget or choose to willingly distract yourself from the context. And the mind will have to hear it, because it's just, that's all it sees now. Like taming the elephant, you first have to get it out of the wild forest that's sort of perpetuating its wild behavior. And then it will kick and scream. When it comes down, then, okay, well, here's the food. Here is it. It starts taking the food, starts listening, starts recognizing me. Okay, now stand up, move down, do this, do this. All of that, it's on the level of making the mind turn away from things that are unbeneficial for the mind and for you. But you can't force it. You can't magically have something that will just result in this, how did I get there? Anyway, it doesn't matter. This must be what Nibbana is. No, you train it away from it. Gradual training. And then it will listen to you. And then if the mind listens to you through perpetually feeding the context, sustaining the context, whether you're sitting, walking, going to the toilet or whatever else, then you won't have to feed that context as much. And that's exactly what the Buddha said. Wait, now my mind is not going back to these things. I'm not getting these thoughts. It doesn't delight in sensuality anymore. There is no more cruelty. I could rest now. I don't need to be constantly working on the context, the two types of thought. Okay, so let me now steady this mind internally, no work to be done. If sensuality comes coming back again, or ill will, I know what to do. The context, bring it back until the mind calms down. And that's what led into first jhana. Calming down within the right context of thinking and pondering that the mind has withdrawn from.
And the context is basically understanding beneficial and unbeneficial.
The context is always in regard to where your mind is leaning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a universal sort of thing that's context. No. First, what's the state of the mind now? What are you currently feeling? What is your attitude towards what you're currently feeling? Are you delighting? Are you resisting? Are you fearing it? Context in regard to that every single time. Whenever there is a feeling present, you got to work on the context in regard to it. Otherwise, you'll be conflating feeling for your suffering.
Whereas, if you're acting out of sensuality, ill will, distraction, what is in front of you, you cannot establish the context because you're always changing what's in front of you.
Yeah.
So
or at least hoping that it will result in changing what's in front of me, which just perpetuates the view that you think the problem was there in front of you.
So you're not allowing that thing to endure to then be able to establish
to
the
reveal
context.
your attitude of whether the mind is delighting or resisting and so on. You won't see the signs of your mind if you don't let things endure on that mental level.
Yeah.
Are there any means how one can accelerate this process?
Well, but probably the first mean would be the question you need to ask yourself: why would you want to accelerate it?
Well, I mean, it's obvious to say we have finite life, and it's better whether you believe it.
Yeah, but no, what makes you think that already the practice is not fast enough or something? Why do you want it to be even faster? Is it because it's not happening? Or because you still suffer? So, in a way, yes, if you understand suffering thoroughly right here and now, you'll be an arahant right here and now. So, means of accelerating the process are not on the level of process. They're on the level of understanding. So if you're coming from a point of view of a method, are there things that I can do to speed this up? No. If you're coming from a point of view of determination to understand clarity and protecting the context, yes, and that's exactly what you do. But even then you can't say how fast it will be. The Buddha couldn't say how fast it would be. He said if somebody practices upon the right view, they practices 4 foundations of mindfulness correctly, well, it might take 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, or half a night if they do it rightly. In the same sense, he gave the simile of the carpenter with an axe. He uses it, he works on it, he's not concerned about how quickly the handle is wearing thin. But he knows it has to wear thin because I'm using it. So if your concern is on the acceleration, means you're kind of not seeing it on the level of understanding. If you're seeing it on the level of understanding, consideration wouldn't bother you because you wouldn't have craving in regard to the speed of your freedom from craving.
So there was this example from of Venerable Ananda, who could not, wasn't enlightened or wasn't an arahant, and he was trying to accelerate it basically, and he was even reproached that instead of meditating, he was sort of soothing the people's pain because of the demise of the Buddha. So apparently, or would you say that if he didn't meditate, then he wasn't really sustaining this attitude, so that he needed to sit in order to make progress?
I don't quite understand. Can you say again?
So apparently he, through his meditation and through his sitting, he managed to accelerate it to the point that he attained.
Right. Well, again, relatively speaking, it wasn't the meditation or the sitting. He was actually walking, and that did not accelerate it. It was what made him do that accelerated, and what made him do that is the fact that he, closest to the Buddha, was not allowed now to join the meeting of arahants because he's still a trainee. So it was a sense of shame, lack of accomplishment, weakness, that made him then make the effort. And then when he finished walking meditation and contemplation, that's what walking meditation is. It's not how could it? How could you watching soles of your feet, for example, what people generally would think, slow movement, how can that reveal the context of the attitude you're currently enduring feeling? No, only you investigate in that direction. So that's what he did. He protected the context in regard to any thought that had arisen that was of the unwholesome nature. He established his mind upon the nature of an enduring body, for example, such as that it's unknowable to the point of soles of top of your head to the soles of your feet, and he drilled that throughout the night. He protected the context, he steadied his mind in it, he did not get distracted from it. When he said, okay, I did what I could do, I have to lay down and rest, so be it. So he did, and he realized, oh, I actually completed all the work. So he used the handle. He did not stop to check the handle. Am I accelerating this? Am I accelerating this? No, he just used it until his hand went numb and he just lay to sleep and then realized, oh, he wore out the handle. And yeah, then he was an arhat. But even then he couldn't tell how much he's accelerating. And the acceleration in this sense was not his committed sort of meditation technique. It was the sense of shame and lack of accomplishment, which was often found in other suttas as well. When a monk was about to kill himself because he was not free from sensuality for over 25 years of being in robes, and about to use the knife with the despair and anger and frustration, and then that made him practice and take up the practice correctly and finish the work, and then became an arhat. Therigatha full of that.
But he basically seeing the danger.
Danger becomes... He had the right view. That's like, yeah. So it's not a question, he didn't even know what the Dhamma is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why he felt so ashamed. For over 20 years that he's been with the Buddha, he knew what the work was. He was a Sotapanna from the start. Yet he didn't do it because he was too busy distracting himself with helping these people, helping those people, serving the Buddha and everything else. He didn't do his work. I mean, the Buddha himself reprimanded him many times quite harshly in the suttas. So it's not just a question of he doesn't have a clue what the practice is, and just out of a blue decided he's going to sit and meditate, and in the morning he was an arhat. He knew exactly what the practice was, he just wasn't doing it. He was distracting himself from it.
So could you say that if you want to accelerate the work, do the work, basically? It's more as in...
Well, exactly. There is no magical kind of, I accelerate certain behavior, they will then result in this. No, you accelerate what you know need acceleration. And what needs acceleration is, again, protecting the context, not maintaining, not tolerating the mind that is sort of delighting in sensuality, having thoughts of cruelty, having thoughts of conceit and vanity and so on. So, yeah, the work needs to be done, and you could do it faster, more efficiently, if the work is clear. So if you want to accelerate the progress towards arhatship, you need to understand first what progress towards arhatship is. In other words, you need to get the right view, become a Sotapanna, and then you'll know exactly what to do. And if you commit to it, as the Buddha said himself, you might get it in a fortnight. You might clear your mind from any assumption, any resistance towards anything felt within a fortnight. If not, at least within 7 years. If there is some residue left, well, again, you wouldn't have to worry. Eventually it will sort itself out.
So you might maybe say, clarifying the work, clarifying the danger that you're in, clarifying the escape from that danger, clarifying, making an effort.
Yeah, but even then,
into that clarification.
Even then, the point is, even then, the relationship between your context, your effort, the danger, the sense restraint, and the mind development, it's not a power of I choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is the result. It always has that indirect certain aspect to it. So, yes, if you really withdraw your elephant from the wilderness, really use the leather straps, really feed it at the right time, right things, it will calm down quicker. But that's not to say that you can influence that quickness directly to make it calm down quicker. Trying to make it calm down quicker would be stopping the work using the axe handle to check, is it wearing out? You can't check it while you're using it. So you realize, let me stop checking. Let me just work and use it. When it runs out, I will know it's liberated, as the Arahants would say. Oh, is it? How much? You can't quantify it in that sense.
So basically, Ananda didn't need to really to do any practice. So, any, let's say, formal practice. So he could just have stayed, in his abode and whatever, and this would be his meditation.
Well, yeah, his meditation is on the level of the mind. So the meditation is on the level of where the mind inclines, what the assumptions there are. So the practice is to unravel that, disentangle it, abandon the unwholesome, cultivate the wholesome. So nobody needs to do any practice in that sense, like physically. What you physically need to do is withdraw yourself from sensuality, not act out, when you're touched by unpleasant feeling, don't give rise to actions by body and by speech. Cultivate that endurance, being able to take it so you don't act out of it, so you see what the context is behind it. So what physically needs to be done is withdrawn from acts of sensuality, seclusion, moderation in eating, and then not spending all your time sleeping or distracting yourself with work or talking with others. That's the extent of physical methods. Then the watchfulness, the knowledge of intentions, that's no matter what you do physically. I mean, the Buddha said when he purified his mind, entered the first jhana, then whether he was walking, going to the toilet, clearing his bowl, eating, whatever he was doing, it was divine, because the mind was fully turned away from that. He has surmounted it. And now you know, so this is how I accelerate my practice. By providing the suitable food, avoiding the unsuitable food. I don't know to what degree the speed will increase, but I know for sure it will have to go in that direction. So the more suitable food it is, the better the withdrawal, the more effort I make into protecting the context, the faster my mind is. Like basically the more I work with an axe handle, the more is wearing out. Just factually, it's wearing down. If I pick it up once a month, well, that's the acceleration rate, once a month. If I work with it every single day, 6 hours a day, well, I can't see how much directly, but I know for sure it's more than once a month. And also, another reason why you cannot directly influence or know acceleration is because you don't really know how much that mind needs to be completely purified. So all you can do is provide a context and then keep working on it. And that's what it says. Arahants would carry on practicing mindfulness, so to speak, because it ceases to be practice for them. And they would recognize when the mind is liberated, and they would know liberated mind as liberated mind. They would know, there is no coming back to what has been liberated from. At that point they can drop the practice, but then you realize, well, there's nothing for them to drop, because they haven't been doing anything in that sense of, I got to stop these duties now. But yeah, sense of urgency is an acceleration factor. Fear is an acceleration factor. Divine messengers are acceleration factors. So you want to accelerate your practice, ponder about what you're liable to, what's about to happen to your health, to your life, to the loved ones, to the things you possess. Like inevitable, inconceivable for it to be otherwise. Yet, by ignoring it, people develop this assumption that it's not going to happen. Oh no, of course I know it's going to happen. Yeah, but you don't dwell on it. If you dwell on it, then it will sink in that it will happen. And that will be felt differently. So there you go. You're going to have immediate acceleration. But be careful before you start accelerating, because you better know what direction you need to accelerate to. If you still don't even know what the practice is, and then just start accelerating things, well, I suppose if you have enough composure, that could make you then really try to find out what the practice is. But it could also make you break down. So the two results of being touched by suffering correctly: noble search or mental derangement. That's exactly what I ended up describing here.
And someone said recently it's also about not infinitely trying to clarify the idea of what the practice or what enlightenment is, but also asking myself, am I applying myself to the degree to which I have understood?
It. Yeah. Well, that's that other, I mentioned it was yesterday. So he visits the wise men, a person intent upon his welfare. I better find a way out of this situation. So he visits the wise man. He doesn't look for faults. Doesn't mean he accepts everything they say. No, he hears the teaching, then he reflexively ponders on it, then he measures the task. In other words, it's not just a question of accepting the view that I presented you. It's exactly what you just said. Okay, so to this extent, this is what I do. This is how I apply myself. This is what I don't do with the this. Let me do it and see whether it brings some sort of affirmation of that this is the right practice and so on. But it is through doing you can then find out. But not like, oh, this is pleasing to me, thus I accept it. Oh, this is displeasing to me because I don't like how he looks, thus I don't accept it. That's not wisdom. That's just preferences.
Or let me compare. Let me go to the other wise man and the other wise man and the other wise man.
You can compare
and see which one is.
If you lack clarity as to what you need to really apply, you can compare. But exactly, then you could equally lose perspective and end up being just revolving around comparisons and drawing parallels and similarities and the two factors from here respond to 5 and this each this. Are you applying any of that? If so, is there a measurable kind of freedom from suffering felt, experienced, clarity in regard to, okay, now if there is no access to information, if there is no access anymore to any sutta, any teaching, any questions and answers, would I know exactly what to do, and if I stick to it, complete freedom from suffering here and now within 7 days, 7 months, 7 years? Do I know that?
Lifetimes.
Huh?
7 lifetimes.
Or 7 lifetimes, sure, but you don't necessarily see that.
Aye.
Like even Sotapannas needed to be told that by the Buddha.
Hmm.
But this you would see, no, this is the way out, I'm sure already. Do I see it? And if there is no more distractions or other input, if I were to stick to it, would this free me from suffering? Do I have such knowledge? Knowing the way out, basically. And that's Sotapanna, knowing the way out. That's why it says in the suttas, one who becomes Sotapanna, he's like, he's beyond the instruction from anybody else. He's beyond the changes in the views of the world. And he's certainly beyond following any other teacher, in a sense, even if the entire world says, oh, the Buddha was wrong, well, he knows that the entire world is wrong. Because on account of understanding what the Buddha instructed, he himself, here and now, sees the complete freedom from suffering. But then, he can become negligent, distracted, and so on, because he's kind of free on one level, certainly from Putujana's point of view, which is why the complacency can set in. And that's why the Buddha needed to constantly remind the noble disciples that there is still work to be done, thus do it, because you can, it's right there. Or if some external circumstance prompted them, such as the Buddha's passing away, the despair, the shame, okay, now there's really nothing else worth of my time. See, that's what Ananda felt. He felt serving the Buddha, being around the Buddha was a justifiable distraction. Because as far as the distractions go, it was pretty justifiable.
So isn't it a wrong view?
Sorry?
Isn't it a wrong view?
Which one?
That there is justifiable distraction.
Not necessarily like a wrong view in terms of not knowing what the way out of suffering is. It's certainly an impediment. Distraction is distraction. That's why Sotapanna is not an arahant, but Sotapanna doesn't have the wrong views. But he still has the hindrances, he still has the distraction, he still has degree of lust, aversion, conceit. So I wouldn't say it's a wrong view, I would say you can have it with the right view that has not been fully developed. Those are the residues. The distraction, the lust, the irritation, the hindrances. Only arahant is beyond, has destroyed hindrances.
But I mean, it's a false conception.
Which one?
Well, that there is something which is worse of distracting myself. So basically,
no, it's a relative. I wouldn't say it's false. As I said, as far as the distractions go, serving the Buddha, it's least harmful distraction. But yes, from an arahant's point of view, or one who wants to be an arahant, it's a distraction, which is why the Buddha kept telling him off as well, to not distract himself. But if that were to be on the level of the view, then there would be no noble disciples that understood the path but haven't fully developed. It would be either you have a wrong view, you know nothing, and you have a right view, you are an arahant. But there is the whole area in between, which is often why people can't understand. How can Sotapanna not want to practice for Nibbana, become distracted from it, engage with sensuality? Well, that's how. It's not on the same level. You got the overall view, the freedom, the way out. But now you got to do it. Now you got to protect your mind from unwholesome. I mean, the Buddha gave, I don't know, maybe not hundreds, but many similes exactly. Like, I would come and I would pull the arrow out of the wound. The surgeon would come and do that and tell, listen, good man, I pulled the arrow, no more poison left, but the wound is still there. It will take time for it to heal. If you want to accelerate its healing, eat the right food, don't eat the wrong food. cover it up, don't expose it to dust and the sun, and so on. But then that man would expose it to the dust, expose it to the sun, eat the unsuitable food, the wound would get infected and he would suffer on account of it. And then he gave that's how somebody gets the right view, pulls the arrow of ignorance, the poisonous humor of craving and so on, but factually the mind still needs time to tame down. But then they go and do unsuitable things, attend to unsuitable things, distract themselves, so they perpetuate the wound unnecessarily. That's the difference here.
So can one then say that a Sotapanna has, let's say, right view with regard to the practice, but he might have lots of wrong views regarding, maybe even regarding the hindrances?
Well, no, see, again, it's not the views you're talking about. So right view is not on a level of opinion about a practice. Right view is the existential attitude. Now, sure, within an existential attitude of right kind or wrong kind, you can have many irrelevant views. Like Sotapanna can have many views on other things that have nothing to do with the practice, or that are secondary to it. But fundamentally, his right, the nature of the right view, it means that it's not on the level, of the same level as wrong views and opinions or generally ideas that people would have. It's the view that basically has uprooted the Attavada in regard to any view you might have. So it's not just over there, comparable.
So they might be ignorant about like some worldly thing.
Well, they might be ignorant about the those like more detailed aspects of the Dhamma or the Buddha's instruction, because they haven't done it long enough, they haven't pondered it long enough. But they cannot be ignorant about what this is, about the nature of not self, about where the true cause of suffering is, and where the true escape. They can't be ignorant about that.
Yeah, it says like Sotapanna could engage in sensuality, but if he had to ask himself or look in, is this good, beneficial?
He wouldn't need to.
Oh yeah. But then he couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So what Sotapanna can do is turn a blind eye to his right existential attitude of the right view. And that's like when people did become Sotapannas and then, okay, but let me go and, home, mother, wives, I have to look after. As in, they are content now with that deeper understanding of where the escape is. Because see, you can be in the prison and what is really frightening is you don't know the way out. Like really, you don't know the way out. It's just you're completely entrapped. And then you find the way out. You fully, and even the guards are not aware of it. Nobody's aware of it. And you can see it and you can go halfway up and come back, but you're not leaving the prison yet. Because it's going to be a bit unpleasant to crawl through the way out. And also, you got some friends and people you need to help in here before you go out. Because if I go out, you're on your own. You don't exist for me anymore. But I want to help them. They helped me here before I knew the way out, or whatever, children, dependents, and so on. So they postponed the way out. That is going nowhere. And that's another sense of safety where it comes from. Sotapanna's right view, it's not going anywhere. And that's exactly why they can procrastinate. And that, like, the first time you read, it's like, but how can they? Because the idea of enlightenment is just this experience, and it's just boom, done, finished. There's nothing in between. But then you have the Buddha constantly reprimanding monks Sotapannas, Sakadagamis, Anagamis, for not completing the work. Well, that's how you not complete the work. You know where the work is, it requires doing, but there is something else keeping you to this. Justifiable, not some ridiculous...
sewing robes.
Yeah, when they were sewing robes and spreading the order and teaching the nuns and all of that. But at the same time, have you escaped all the way out? You got to put that first, and that's exactly that's exactly the difference here. And see, now although a Sotapanna would choose to stay in that prison, there is no more fear, there is no more dread and terror from the guards, from not knowing the escape, because you know the escape, and not just that you know the escape, you know that you know the escape, and anything that could block that escape does not even know about the escape. So it's an internal dimension between you and escape. That nobody, not anything in the world, devas, brahmas, anything, can come in between. So yeah, it's pretty much quite an immeasurable confidence. But you do have to start crawling up that escape eventually, and Ananda did when there was no more justifiable reasons for him to stay in the prison, paired with all the shame that he felt on account of Arahants dismissing him. I mean, Mahakassapa was quite blunt, some might say rude. On a number of occasions calling him young boy and stuff like that. He says, well, you call me young boy, I have grey hairs. And they're completely disrespecting him because he's not doing the work. Not that he doesn't know what the work is. He's just distracting himself. And from somebody's point of view like Mahakassapa, who was like the foremost austere determinations, jhanas at will, hemp robes, rough forest, refusing any comfort, yeah, you could see why he was talking the way he was talking. So it was quite a contrast.
For him, only just 7 days, he says.
Yeah.
I was
when
eating
he
the
got
Arahant's
it,
foods
that's
as
how.
a debtor.
Yeah,
For
7 days he was done.
Too long.
When the Buddha called him and says, "Hey, come on, you finish your work. You're old now. Like getting on. Like why living in the rough forest and wearing rough robes and living off poor food? I get plenty of robes. I get plenty of dwellings. Come and you can partake in this because you did the work." He says, No. Whoever can obtain jhanas at will and all these states of mind at will, this is heaven. This is so pleasant. And it would have praised him for practicing for the future generation, not for him. For the future, as in, like, it's inspiring. What he's doing, it's inspiring.